My name is Scotia Gilroy and I'm Canadian. I'm from Vancouver, Canada, and I currently live most of the time in Krakow, Poland. I am a translator of Polish literature into English. That's the main thing that occupies me now. But I also write my own prose and poetry. And I have been involved in music all of my life. I am currently not playing concerts anymore, but it was something that I did for many years. I had a couple of music projects. One was called Vladimirska, and I was also in a cowboy band called the Silver Owls. I've expressed myself in a lot of different ways, but my main focus is literature. I did a degree in English literature in Canada long ago, and in my final year, I discovered Polish literature, just in the last couple months of my last year of my English degree. And the very first book of Polish literature that I found was a collection of short stories by a writer named Bruno Schulz called Cinnamon Shops. My boyfriend at the time was working in a secondhand bookshop, and he discovered this book and showed it to me, and we were both blown away by how beautiful the writing was and interesting, and it kind of opened up our awareness of Poland as a place that exists. And it coincided with a time when we were thinking about leaving Canada for a while to teach English in Central or Eastern Europe. And when we graduated together, we chose Krakow as the place we were going to try to teach English in. And it was mainly through this interest in Polish literature. We started reading other authors at that time. We both became very interested in interwar writers, such as Witkacy, Gombrowicz, Naukowska, and it really struck me how bold and experimental and uncompromising Polish authors are. And I got really interested in the literature from Poland. So it started off just me reading it in English translation because I didn't know Polish at that time. So we moved here and started teaching English, and from the very beginning I started learning Polish very intensively. And in the year 2016 I applied for a mentorship through the British Centre for Literary Translation in Norwich. And the mentor there for Polish is Antonia Lloyd-Jones. She opened a lot of doors for me, helped me make a lot of contact with publishing houses, and I just jumped into it. And so my first commissions were all to do samples of novels that they were trying to pitch to foreign publishers, because every publishing house creates these catalogs of their freshly published books. So I started off doing samples. I started doing a lot of texts for art galleries, cultural institutions. So any text that's sort of in the realm of culture, art, visual art, music. I was doing things like that for a long time. And then for the past couple of years, I'm just focused exclusively on literature. It's interesting how literary translation and creative writing can kind of live in symbiosis. It's possible to do these in tandem, because being a literary translator means that I'm constantly writing. Even though I'm writing somebody else's work, basically, I'm being their ambassador and trying to capture their tone, their style, their voice, their literary voice. It all somehow helps me in my own writing, because just the sheer act of constantly writing and reading keeps the words flowing. So I've found that I've always wanted to write. I've been writing passionately since I was about 5 years old. Since I first learned to write, I always had this need to express myself that way. So I've always dreamed of writing short stories, poems, novels, but becoming a translator has kind of opened up a lot of floodgates for me. I had a lot of, I think, internal editors and guardians of gates that were just closed all the time inside me, and somehow being other writers' ambassador has sort of helped me understand my own literary voice, and like I said, just keeping the words flowing all the time. So I try to write in a diary every single day, at least 5 pages. I write about my life. That's often a starting point for stories of my own. As for my inspiration and my ideas, I take a lot of ideas from the things I experience and people I meet and their stories. So whenever I hear anything interesting at all, I'm constantly writing about it in my diary, and that often becomes a starting point for it's like a little germ of an idea that starts to blossom at some later point. When I sit down and try to write a story, I'll go back through all these little sketched out scenes and ideas and stories that people have told me or that I've learned from learning about Polish history. A lot of ideas have come to me here in Kraków as a result of just how interesting and rich Polish history and culture are. Kraków is a UNESCO City of Literature, and it earned that title because of its rich literary tradition, its history, and how many writers are connected to this city. So there are 2 Nobel Prize winning authors that lived in Kraków. There's Czesław Miłosz. He won the Nobel Prize in 1980. Wisława Szymborska won the Nobel Prize in 1996. In the old days, I actually used to see both of those poets walking around. So just the presence of writers here for me is very exciting as a translator of Polish literature. I can actually know a lot of writers. There are, I saw a statistic that there are 800 poets currently living in Kraków. I definitely don't know all of them, but I know a lot of them. And Kraków has a lot of festivals that bring not only writers from all over Poland, like Polish authors, but also international writers. So the one that's very exciting for me is always Conrad Festival in October. That's focused on prose. And in June, there's the Miłosz Festival, that's poetry. And a lot of really world-class writers come for that. So that's exciting to have a chance to listen to famous writers, meet them. Poland's best publishing houses are based in Kraków. Wydawnictwo Literackie, Znak, Charakter, a lot of others, HAART, A5. And that's been very important for me because I can have personal connections with people who hire me to translate Polish literature. Kraków has a lot of phenomenal bookshops. It actually has 80 bookshops and 30 secondhand bookshops, if I'm remembering correctly. Something not many people know is that the oldest bookshop in the world is here in Kraków. A lot of people say that the oldest bookshop in the world is the Bertrand bookshop in Lisbon, Portugal, but that was actually founded in 1732, and the bookshop here in Kraków in the main square was begun in 1610. So more than a century before Bertrand. However, Bertrand holds the record because it's the oldest bookshop that's been in operation continuously with no interruption. And the reason why this one here does not have that record is because of World War II. They actually had to close down for a while. So because of that, it doesn't have this continuous record. But it's the oldest bookshop, at least in that space. And of course, the bookshop has changed hands many times since 1610. Some years ago, it was a bookshop called Matras, which was really great, and I regret, sadly, that closed down. However, it was taken over by Empik, and Empik is a big bookshop chain. And so, on the one hand, it's good that it's still technically a bookshop. It hasn't stopped being a bookshop and become a McDonald's or something. However, Empik is a little bit less of a literary spot than Matras was. But I still do pop into that Empik once in a while just because it's nice to be within that space that's been a bookshop since 1610. And I've always felt that this city loves literature, it loves books. That's proven by the number of bookshops that are constantly in operation and doing well. People buy books here, and books are treated with a lot of respect. And you can see on the bank of the river in summertime that people are reading, and so, yeah, I feel very good here. I'm currently translating 2 Polish novels. One will be published next year by Penguin Random House in Canada and in the United States. And the second novel will be published in England by MTO Press. And I don't know if I'm allowed to mention the title and author of either of those books yet because the publicity hasn't started yet, so I think I can't. But that's what I'm quite consumed by right now, and I love both of those books, and I'm very excited that they'll be available to the world in English thanks to me. This is why I love being a translator, is being able to allow the rest of the world to read some incredible work that's being written here in Poland. And I'm also working as hard as I can in the free time that I managed to claim from outside of my literary translation projects. I'm trying to write some short stories that are based on experiences I've had here in Poland, particularly in my early years, like 20 years ago. I'm looking back through old diaries I kept during those times and writing stories about what it was like to be a foreigner here. Yeah.